Planet of Evil, the second serial of Doctor Who's 13th season, first broadcast in 4 parts from the 27th of September to the 18th of October 1975. In the story, the Fourth Doctor, played by Tom Baker, and his companion, Sarah Jane Smith, played by Elizabeth Sladen, receive seemingly an SOS from planet Zeta Minor. When they get there, they discover a kind of petrified forest kind of situation, but they eventually find a scientist named Sorensen, played by Frederick Jaeger. Now, he was on a kind of expedition or a mission to find something on planet Zeta Minor. And Zeta Minor is seemingly the last planet that they discovered on the edge of anything, on the edge of the universe. And he has found a substance there that he believes could be an unlimited source of energy, and he plans to try and take it back to Earth. However, he's been considered missing on the planet for a while, and 7 or 6 members of his crew have all turned up dead. So, a crew has been sent out from the planet Morestra to try and rescue him and bring him home and bring back anyone who did. The crew is captained by a man named Salamar, played by Prentice Hancock, and also has a crew member named Wyszynski, played by Ewan Solon. However, things end up getting complicated when it turns out that the substance that Sorensen has brought back is in fact antimatter. Now, I personally am not that familiar with antimatter as a theory or as a concept. I mean, I know the very basics of it, that antimatter is kind of like the opposite of matter, and antimatter cannot exist when matter is involved, or at least one destroys the other, or they both destroy each other. I'll admit I'm not an expert on this. If you want to know more about antimatter, there are other places to look. But anyway, Sorensen seems set that this stuff that he's found, which is actually antimatter, could be a solution to their energy crisis. However, it seems that when they try and leave with the ship, they can't actually get away from Zeta Minor, and while the Doctor keeps trying to explain to them it's because they've got antimatter and therefore they can't leave the planet, nobody believes him, and gradually over time stuff starts to happen, and it actually does make some quite terrifying stuff. Like, for example, one of the things they end up encountering is seemingly an invisible creature, or kind of like a creature that's just made of red lines, which is supposed to be entirely made of antimatter. And even then, when Sorensen ends up effectively drinking antimatter, which leads me to think that can't be good for your health, he ends up becoming a kind of monstrous creature that they refer to as Anti-Man. And soon it's discovered that it's not just the antimatter on board the ship that means they can't leave, but because Sorensen is now effectively bonded with it, he's now a source of antimatter, and it becomes quite frightening. Like, while I admit the stuff on the planet I wasn't that interested in, all the stuff aboard the spaceship, I feel that's great stuff, some great moments of tension. Like, even just the end of part 3 when, like, the crew constantly throughout refuses to believe that they've got antimatter aboard the ship. They're just like, well, no, we haven't. We dumped all of it. And it's just like, no, you didn't. Sorensen evidently kept some back. Like, he is now the source of the antimatter. It's like, we should throw you two overboard. I mean, you're the ones who caused all these problems. I mean, even just the end of part 3 when they're getting kind of pushed closer to the locks, or the airlocks, to be shooted out into space. That's some quite terrifying stuff. And even just towards the end of part 4, like when Sorensen has now kind of fully become an antimatter creature and is now kind of replicating, just seeing these antimatter men walking around the ship, it's quite scary stuff. As I said, I'm not entirely familiar. Well, I'm not an expert on the theory of antimatter, but they do actually some quite creative stuff here. And even just towards the end, now, this last part will contain a little bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear it, just go off, watch the episode, and then come back. But even just the end, I was a little surprised that they actually end up saving Sorensen. Like the Doctor manages to get down to the planet's surface. He manages to kind of trick Sorensen into falling into the pit where he originally found the antimatter. Like, he falls into the pit. The Doctor throws the remaining container of antimatter in, and the antimatter creature kind of that they had seen at first kind of pops up. It's implied that it's kind of like a thank you because the Doctor had previously made a deal with the antimatter universe that if he could get the antimatter back from the ship, then they would be able to leave without consequence. And then they see Sorensen lying beside the pit, kind of injured but still alive. To which the Doctor actually saved the heel, even though this guy had been pretty much throughout the entire story going, "No, I must get this back, I must get this to civilization." And it's just like, no, you can't. So just for him to save the guy, it kind of makes sense. I mean, the story's not entirely without a bloodbath, as Sorensen did end up killing several people on board the ship while there's anti-man phase, to which I will once admit, not all the effects kind of work in this story. Like, while the antimatter kind of creatures made of red lions, well, they're pretty cool. When he's kind of when Sorensen is absorbing the antimatter, some of the effects are pretty dodgy. Like, do a part where he kind of drinks the antimatter concoction and then he suddenly gets red eyes, and it's just like, did you just basically paint his eyelids red so that he could do this? It looks a little dodgy, as we said. So, yeah, the effects in this particular story aren't necessarily the best, and I will admit I'm not entirely familiar about the theory, but aside from that, I think this is kind of like a diamond in the rough. Like, all the stuff on board the spaceship, all the tension moments, and just them trying to deal with an uncooperative crew whilst almost being dragged to their deaths, I think it's actually a pretty good story. So, yeah, I'd definitely say that Planet of Evil is kind of like a hidden gem. Like, some of the stories you do have to wade through in order to get there, but once you do, it's one that shouldn't be ignored. Anyway, I only have one story left to review of Season 13, which I will be doing later this month. That is The Seeds of Doom. So, the next classic Doctor Who review I'm going to be doing is The Seeds of Doom. However, if you're following the playlist, then the next one up, I believe, should be Pyramids of Mars, which I did not so long ago. Anyway, till next time, see ya.